Hi guys, welcome. And who dat? I'm Joe, and today we are going to be looking at some running backs that are in the 2024 NFL Draft. We're going to look at a big list of them, and then we're going to break a few of them down and see how they may fit into the Saints' new offensive scheme. So, as far as running back goes for the Saints, I find that it's a position of need to a degree. You've got Alvin Kamara, who is getting older. He's approaching 30 or he just hit 30. Usually running backs start to decline around this time. Well, Alvin Kamara to me seems like a pretty good back that's got at least a couple of more really good seasons left in him. I think Kamara is going to fit into this scheme very well with Clint Kubiak. And I think that if we just ride out the rest of his contract, which is 2 or 3 more years, you know, unless we can figure out some sort of restructure that doesn't pay him more later, I believe we just eat this contract. And what I mean by eat it is we just pay the man 20-something million 3 years from now and let it be his last year, that kind of deal. And if he wants to restructure, he's going to have to take a pay cut, something like that. So I don't see Alvin Kamara going anywheres. And as far as health and everything else, I think Kamara will be available for most of the games. So we have our starting running back for sure. Now, the backup, Kendre Miller, if you told me he was going to be healthy for the whole year, then I think we have a great 1-2 combo, and we don't need another running back. We wouldn't have a place for him. We have Jamal Williams under contract for 2 more years. He was a bit of a letdown this past season. I'm not sure if he works into this new scheme or not very well. So there's a chance we'll let Jamal Williams go. There's also a chance we keep him, and being a veteran with a lot of experience, especially being a good pass blocker, I could see him being a third running back on this team. We kind of expect him to be our number 2, but I think Kendre Miller's our number 2. So the issue with running back is you're not sure if Kendre Miller's going to stay healthy. He couldn't stay healthy all year, his rookie year, so that's your issue. And then if your main backup's Jamal Williams, he hasn't shown enough. So I've been saying that in free agency, we should address running back. We should try to go and find someone that's familiar with this scheme, that can perform with this scheme. And a free agent, just a regular guy, someone like a little cheaper than Jamal Williams. Eno Benjamin right now is a free agent. Maybe he can perform in this system. He wouldn't cost as much as Jamal Williams, and then you'd have a number 3 running back. So that's what I'm looking for right now, basically, is you've got your starter in Kamara, you got your backup in Kendre Miller, and then we need a third guy. And if that's Jamal Williams, I don't think it's the end of the world. We were pulling guys off the street last year like Darrell Williams. We ran with Tony Jones Jr. for a while. So I'm not concerned about running back too much. With this new scheme, though, it's interesting to think about. It's interesting to think about getting new pieces that can fit in the scheme, and then possibly somebody being special in this scheme. So that's how I approach running back for the Saints in this draft. As far as the draft goes, let's pull up a list. I think this is about 30 players. And I've got your measurables as far as height and weight, and I've also got a 40 time indicated, as well as the projected round in which they're supposed to go. This draft is full of running backs that are supposed to be taken in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round, just like every other position in the draft. You have a few that are exceptional in most positions that could go in the 1st round, but not here for running back. I don't think running back goes in the 1st round in this draft. And then once you start seeing the running backs go, I would say there's probably a good 10 of them, 10 to 12 that are in that mix for early draft picks for teams. I personally don't think I don't think that this batch of running backs are going to really start peeling off until the third round. There may be a few running back needy teams that go for running back in the second round. That's a possibility. But I believe most of these will start going in the third round. Now, if the best running back on the board is there and you need a running back and you grab them in the second round, I wouldn't call it a reach. A lot of people look at running back as a position that's just not important. I think San Francisco has this method every year. They draft a running back in the third round, and they always have nice, fresh pieces. And, typically after a running back's rookie contract, they start to decrease in ability. When you sign a running back to a second contract after his rookie deal, if he's a really good running back, you end up paying him a whole bunch. And before that second contract is over, he's declined where he's not worth the money anymore. That's basically how it is around the league. Sometimes you get a good running back that can make it into their 30s. Kamara's a good example. And look what's happening. Kamara made it through his rookie contract, and now we're paying the guy between $16 million and $25 million a year. So that's a way to avoid that, is just continually draft running backs. But if there's a good one, if you don't have a good one, I don't think it's a reach to draft one high. I mean, running back's one of the most important positions on the team for the league and for fans and whoever else that think that running back's just not important. I think basically what they're saying is it's not so important that you waste your first round or second round pick on it because you can grab guys in the later rounds. Well, that's how it is in this draft as well. Not sure who wants a running back the worst. I'm thinking league-wide. Dallas comes to mind. They may want another true number one. So let's focus in on some of these running backs. And this big list that you see here is, you'll notice that a lot of these running backs are over 210 pounds. I would say that this draft class, probably a C minus, as far as it's got decent depth, but you're taking chances with a lot of these players. There's only a handful of them that can really do everything. So when you draft one of these guys, there is something left to be desired. And we're going to focus on the top right now, starting with the number one guy on the draft boards, Jonathan Brooks out of Texas. 6 foot, 200 pounds. He runs a 4.45. Jonathan Brooks, to my examination, I look at the overall running back, and then I look at four things these are things that I focus on that tells me what I need to know about the player. His speed, of course, but these other four things: his ability to pass block, his ability to run block, his ability to catch, and his ability to break tackles. So I look at those four categories: pass block, run block, catch, break tackle. I allocated a percentage of where they should be ranking, of a rating. And if any of these running backs exceed the baseline that I have for these four talents, then, if they meet it, then hey, great. But actually, there's only one player that does meet all of it. There's only one player that exceeds my baseline at pass blocking, run blocking, catching, and breaking tackles. And that's Jonathan Brooks. He's the overall running back in this class. It would not shock me if somebody took a chance on Brooks in the first round. It would be crazy. Everyone would be saying it's a wasted pick, yada, yada, yada. But I think When it's all said and done, as I look at these running backs, he's the complete package. He's the guy that you take ahead of everybody else. So if you draft him in the first round, I don't think it's a big deal. Last year, when the Detroit Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs early, at the time, people were saying, what is Detroit doing? And, they had just gotten rid of their starting running back, so they drafted another starter to replace him. I didn't think it was a bad pick at all. Jahmyr Gibbs ended up being a really good player. And if he stays healthy, how can you say it's a wasted pick? He's going to be on the field so much. He's going to be so much of a focal point in the offense. The running back always is. So, no, I don't think it's a reach to grab the best running back in the draft, even if it's the first round or the second round. It's just the way that the league looks at it. Why are you grabbing somebody that early when you could have grabbed a better player at another position and you can address running back later on? If you're the Saints, yeah. If you're someone like the Cowboys or any other team that thinks they don't really have a number one running back, San Diego comes to mind too. Austin Eckler's a good player, but I mean, most teams need two running backs. You need to give the guy a break every now and then. So I like Jonathan Brooks. He's the number one guy on the board. He can do it all. He can catch. He can break tackles. He's got great speed, 4.45. And he can pass block. And he can run block. He can do it all. Love Jonathan Brooks. I got him going in the second round as a second to third round projection. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see a team take a chance on him in the first round. Just not the Saints. All right, let's look at, I want to say, 3 more players that are in contention for that top running back selected. And we're going to start with Trey Benson out of Florida State. 6'1", 223 pounds. Really big back. Now, as far as the size goes, I'll give you some comparisons, so you'll have someone to compare to. Alvin Kamara is 5'10", 215 pounds. A lot of these running backs are right at 210, 215. And that's Alvin Kamara's size. So 5'10", 215 is Alvin Kamara. Kendre Miller is 6 foot, 220 pounds. So Trey Benson is more along the lines of a Kendre Miller size. Miller 6 foot, 220. Trey Benson 6'1", 223. All right, the other running back on our team is Jamal Williams, and he is currently listed at 224. And he's lost a lot of weight since he joined the Saints. He was upwards of 235, 230, and now he's down to 224, 225. So, yeah, all 3 of our backs on our team have decent size, Kamara being the smallest one at 215. So that's your baseline. So when you look at these measurables, you have an idea of where these guys fit. I like Trey Benson a lot. He's a great overall rated running back. He's not very consistent at run blocking, though he probably won't be asked to do that a lot. He is a good pass blocker, and he's really good at breaking tackles. But he's got questionable hands in the receiving game. So that's my issue with Benson, why I would take Brooks ahead of Benson. Just not sure what you have as a receiver with Benson. He's a nice-sized guy, quick, and he works on that. And that's the only downside I see to his game, is his receiving game. He's not going to be asked to run block a lot. So if you just work on his hands, I'm real weird about that. Guys that have inconsistent hands. It's one thing if you just don't do it a lot, and maybe that's the case with Benson. There's a lot of college teams that don't throw the ball to the running back a lot. So not sure if Benson dropped a bunch or if he's just inconsistent or if he just wasn't utilized. But that's the one area I worry about. All right, next, let's bring up the big guy out of Tennessee. Jalen Wright, 5'11", 210. So he's right around Kamara size. And he is hot and rising the boards right now. His 40 time listed right now is 4.31, which is really, really fast. And he's really good at breaking tackles. So Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, nice size, and even though he's if you look at Kamara and you think Kamara's not a big back, well then, Jalen Wright necessarily isn't a big back, but he can break tackles. And so you don't have to worry about that. As far as catching the ball and blocking, he's okay. He's just okay. He's not the guy jumping off the page when you throw him the ball. But I don't think you have that many questions with Wright as far as being an overall guy. He needs to work on his blocking. He probably needs to work on his receiving. But overall, he's a good prospect. I got Jalen Wright and Trey Benson right next to each other. I guess if I had to pick one, I might flip a coin. I like what Benson brings because he's a bigger back. But Jalen Wright is tough. And definitely one of the best backs in the draft this year. The next guy I'm going to mention is Blake Corum out of Michigan. 5'8", 213 pounds. So he's a little short, but at 213, he's a pretty stiff dude. Now, he's listed at running a 4.38, which is really good. And he's very good out of the backfield catching the ball. And he's a really good pass blocker. And he's a really good run blocker. The only issue I have with Corum is he doesn't break as many tackles as you think he would for being 213, for being that low to the ground at 213. I'd like to see him break more tackles. But as far as a solid overall player, yeah, I think he's all right. I wouldn't have any issues with taking Corum in the third round. And the only thing he really needs to work on is, breaking tackles, which at 5'8", 213, you can only do so much. I like Corum, though, in the third round. I like Benson in the third round. Brooks, I might take a chance on in the second round. And Wright, probably late second, third round. I don't see the Saints addressing running back with the second round pick 45. So these guys that I'm mentioning that are supposed to be second and third round picks are probably players the Saints would have to pick up extra picks, mid-round picks to address. And we're going to get into this list of backs now that fall into that third round, fourth round area. And like I say all the time, the Saints don't have a third round pick or a fourth round pick. So you're either reaching for one of these guys or you're hoping one of these guys falls or you're making a move to get back into the middle rounds and get these guys. And the first guy I'm going to mention is Bucky Irving. Oh, Bucky. At some points in this offseason, he's flirted with being the best running back in the draft. But right now, I'm pretty sure he's fallen into the bottom of the second round, into the third round. Bucky Irving out of Oregon, 5'10", 195 pounds. He's a touch on the light side. He runs a 4.46. What I like about Bucky is his game is very solid. He breaks tackles. He's good catching the ball out of the backfield. He's a good run blocker. He can learn a little bit as far as pass blocking goes, but that is the only area of concern for me. If Bucky Irving can come in and learn how to pick up blitzes and pass block a little, then he makes himself a hell of a lot more valuable. Oregon is one of those teams that I think that they did just enough where you kind of can see maybe some of the players transitioning into this new scheme. but it's not exact. And Bucky has in my opinion, he has a weird running style. It seems like, in my opinion, he just doesn't seem fluid. Not as fluid as some of these other backs. But overall, he's a good project. And I mean, he's on my short list. But yeah, I wouldn't take a chance on him till the third round. But I really like Bucky Irving a lot. He's just a little light. I think he could work in this game pretty good. I'm going to mention a guy that I like, Audric Estime out of Notre Dame. Audric Estime is probably falling down the draft boards right now. He's a third to fourth round projection. He is a big boy, 5'11", 227 pounds. So he is a thick guy. He runs a 4.48. So he's not the fastest guy. He's not the slowest guy. But when you see Estime run on film, he looks pretty slow. He doesn't look very imaginative. But he's a bowling ball, and he can definitely break tackles. He's okay as a receiver. He's okay as a pass blocker, and I like that. I like that he's got some pass blocking ability. I mean, if you're going to be counted on in the league, you're going to have to be able to do that. Estime's better than most at pass blocking, and he's pretty good run blocker too. Questionable as far as running out in routes and catching balls. And I think the biggest problem people have with him is he doesn't seem to have a lot of moves. He seems to be slow on the field. Another guy that used to look really slow on the field was Pierre Thomas. You know, no one wanted to mess with him either because he didn't have that top end speed. And the guy had vision, though. He could pick up blocks. He could run a screen game better than anybody, follow his blocks. Pierre Thomas, to me, was one of the best running backs the Saints ever had. And I don't care if you lined up all of the Saints running backs in their prime and had them run a 4.40. You know, try to run a 40 and 4.4. Yeah, Pierre Thomas definitely not be the fastest running back the Saints ever had, but he's definitely one of the best. So I look at Audric Estime as a really good pick in the fourth round, a safe pick in the fourth round. We got Kendre Miller in the third round last year. Man, the Saints in fourth round picks, I just don't know what to think anymore. We moved up last year in the fourth round to get Nick Saldiveri. Then we traded our fourth round pick this year, or last year we traded this year's fourth round pick so we can move up in the fourth round and grab Jake Haener. So you use 2 picks to get an offensive guard in the fourth round. You use 2 picks to get a quarterback in the fourth round. And I'm sorry, but the fourth round, you never know. You don't expect guys to come in and start from the fourth round. But if you're spending 2 draft picks on them, I expect them to at least participate in some way. So I got my eye on Nick Saldiveri and Jake Haener right now as 2 players that are wasted picks if we don't get them involved this year. I know you have bumps and bruises with rookies. I expect Nick Saldiveri to suffer a little bit more of a learning curve now that he's got a whole new offensive line scheme to learn, which I think Saldiveri will fit in better than what we were originally trying to do. But yeah, please don't tell me that you don't expect Nick Saldiveri to be a starter when you spend two draft picks to get him, and your starters James Hurst and Garcia. Please don't be spending 2 draft picks in the fourth round if the guy's not going to come in and compete. Okay, that's my position on that. Audric Estime, fourth round draft pick. Yeah, you grab him in the third round, it's a little bit of a reach. But I think there's a lot to work with there, and I'm not scared of the speed. You want to know a guy that's really slow as far as 40 time goes? How about Ray Davis out of Kentucky? 5'8", 220 pounds. Runs a 4.56. Yeah, that's slow as molasses for a running back. 4.56. That is the slowest 40 time on my big board here. That's the slowest time. But I'm not going to be too scared about that overall 40 speed, because when you watch Ray Davis play, he plays great. He's a solid guy. He can break tackles. He can run block. And he's not dead when he's running routes. I mean, he could get a lot better at receiving the ball. And he can get a hell of a lot better at pass protection. So that's my problem with Davis. Not so much that he's got a slow 40 time, because I think actually playing in Kentucky, he's probably going to fit our scheme pretty good. He's just a bigger guy and a little slow, kind of like Audric Estime. Both of them are good at breaking tackles. Both of them have some ability to receive. Both of them are good run blockers. Estime's a good pass blocker. Ray Davis, not so much. So if we get Ray Davis, I expect him to fit into the scheme well, and I expect him to work on pass blocking and pass receiving. But that's where we're at with Davis. I like him. He's on the top of my list. All right, let's go on to one of my favorites in the draft, Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. 5'9", 217 pounds. He runs a 4.45. I think he fits into our scheme pretty good. Third round, fourth round pick. And like I say, these running backs that I'm mentioning now, they're third round, fourth round projections. Well, third round, if you need a running back. Fourth round, if you're just grabbing a piece. So I don't find the Saints are desperate at running back enough to grab any of these guys in the third round unless we acquire extra picks. We don't have a third round pick right now. If we acquire a third round pick, I'd hate for us to spend it on a running back. We have so many other needs. Marshawn Lloyd is not so good at pass blocking. He's going to have to work on that. And actually, as far as the receiving game in general, pass blocking and running routes and catching the ball, he needs to work on all of that. He's worse at pass blocking. He's not so bad in routes. He's a good run blocker, though, and he can break some tackles. And yeah, I like Lloyd. I like his movement on the field. I think he transitions pretty good. A guy that I think not a lot of people are talking about, but that might fit for the Saints pretty good, is Daijun Edwards out of Georgia. A third round, the fourth round projection. He's 5'9", 201 pounds. So he's pretty light. He runs a 4.44. A 4.44 40. Overall, he's a pretty good pass protector. So he's got that going for him right out of the gate. You can put him in on passing downs, and he can pick up blitzes and stuff like that. Yeah, so you make him useful right away. Reminds me of Jamal Williams in that way. So you have a piece that can pass protect. Okay, that's great. You hope every running back you get can do that. If they're going to come in and play spot duty, they got to be able to be out there on passing downs and pick up blitzes. Can Edwards run routes and catch the ball? He's questionable. He's right that he gets right below those averages for me for all of this. So he's just okay at run blocking. He's just okay as a receiver. He's just okay at breaking tackles. Edwards is a pretty light dude, so what you expect is that he can make some people miss, get a little better at that receiving, and maybe bulk up a touch, maybe 5 or 10 more pounds. And then Edwards would be a more complete guy. But he's not out of the question. He would be a decent fourth-round pick for the Saints. The next guy I'm going to mention at the top of the list, and this is the last player that I'm going to mention that's basically these top-tier guys, second, third round, fourth-round guys. Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. What a monster. 6'2", 245 pounds. Oh, he's definitely the biggest back at the top of the list. He's the biggest back on my list. 245. That's a monster. That's bigger than most tight ends coming out of the draft this year. And Braylon Allen's got a 40 time of 4.4 even. So he can get going. That instance, he's not too dissimilar from Derrick Henry. Now, I'm not going to say he's the next Derrick Henry. I'm going to say that he's 245 pounds and he's not slow. So, what is my issue with Allen? Of course, he can break tackles. He can definitely break tackles. And he shows to be a good run blocker, but not a good pass blocker at all. Matter of fact, to me, that's his worry. He's not very good as a receiver. But I think what's even worse is that he can't pass block at all. Hopefully, he can learn something about it and get better. A guy that big, you know that if he's getting the ball and running, nobody wants to tackle that thing. So you've got that going for you if you get a guy like Allen. He's really the only guy like this in the draft. But yeah, he's going to be a pound and ground guy. He's going to be like your third and short running back. If he turns out to be an overall pretty good prospect, then yeah, you've got a monster in the backfield on first and second downs. A guy nobody wants to tackle. But he's far from an every down player, so I kind of shy away from Allen. And of course, 3 years from now, when he's breaking 3-4 tackles on the way to a touchdown, we're all going to be saying, why didn't we grab him? He was so big. Well, this offense, the Klint Kubiak system, I think you're going to need a guy with some moves. You're going to need a guy with some receiving ability. And that's pretty important for me at running back right now. Hold on. Okay, so let's go now to the second tier of players that I want to highlight. Most of these guys are going to go in the 4th round, possibly into the 5th round. And that's where the Saints become players, because we have projected to have 5 or 4 5th-round picks. So we expect to package a few and move up into the 4th round. If we do what we normally do, we'll trade next year's picks so we can move around in the 3rd and 4th round. I know how this team is. We're going to end up with 5 players on this team because we're going to trade so many picks to move around. But these are the guys that fall into that 4th round, possibly into the 5th round. So these are players that I think the Saints are really going to focus on. And I'm going to start with a guy out of the University of New Hampshire. His name is Dylan Laube, or Dylan Loeb, or Dylan Lobb. University of New Hampshire, 5'9", 210 pounds. He runs a 4.46. I like him. He's getting a lot of buzz right now, and he might go in the 3rd round. That's how much buzz he's getting. But, we'll see. He's a good pass blocker, and he's a good receiver. So he might fit into our scheme pretty good. I don't think we're going to ask him to run block, and he doesn't break tackles. Okay, so he's going to have to be a little shifty if he's going to make some big plays. But to be able to pass block and to be able to receive right out of the gate makes him a pretty good X factor. I would consider Dylan Laube out of New Hampshire to be one of those borderline scat back 3rd down kind of guys. Certainly good running routes, pass protection. So I like that. If you can start off with a guy that's good and he can be on there, he can be on the field in passing situations as well as running the ball. So I've got Dylan Laube circled for the Saints. He's on my short list. A guy that I've always liked in the draft is Cody Schrader out of Missouri. He's another guy that's slow. Slow, 4.6. I mentioned one other guy that was, Ray Davis was 4.56. Schrader's 4.6. So Schrader's got the slowest time out of everyone. Every time I watch Cody Schrader play, I think of Pierre Thomas. I watch how he uses his blockers, follows his blockers. He's good at breaking tackles. He needs to get better in the overall passing game, though. He needs to be a better pass blocker, and he needs to be better in routes and receiving. But I like him. I like the way he moves. Yeah, he's slow, but doesn't matter. Get the ball, use some vision, follow your blockers, hit the space when you see his space as hard as you can. I like Schrader. I think he's one of those guys that doesn't get drafted until the 4th or 5th round, but then he ends up being a good guy. He ends up being one of those guys. I'm going to comp him to somebody like James Conner, where when you have him, you see some stuff. If you give him a chance and you play him a whole season and get him involved and coach him up, he could be a solid running back for you. But I think overall, you just kind of hope he's a good second or third back on your team. And yeah, Schrader may end up on somebody's practice squad when it's all said and done, but I like the ability there, even though he's slow. Anytime I watch a player in college and he reminds me of Pierre Thomas, I get excited. So another guy that looks pretty good on the field is Frank Gore Jr. And wow, his dad was great. Frank Gore Sr. was supposed to be one of those guys that was injured all the time and no one wanted to draft him because they wasn't sure if he was going to make it, health-wise. And then he ends up putting in this 13, 15-year career. You just never know, right? And Frank Gore Sr. as an overall player, I kind of liked. I think his son's got a different kind of game. 5'7", 199 pounds. He runs a 4.5. He can break tackles, and he's a good pass blocker. So, break tackles, good pass blocker, yeah, there's a spot on the team for you right away. He's questionable as far as running routes and catching the ball. I have a high expectation for that. The number that I set for catch and receive grade is a pretty high number. So when I say they're questionable, I mean, they're not blowing you away with their receiving skills. So Gore, questionable when it comes to receiving, but he can catch the ball. I'm sure he can be just adequate. I'm sure he'd be fine. But he can pass block and he can break tackles. And he has good movement out of southern Mississippi. So I like Frank Gore Jr. Didn't think I'd say that, but I do after watching the film. Those are three guys that fluctuate between the 4th round and 5th round. Somebody might fall in love with one of them and try to get them early, but I don't think so. I think Schrader and Gore last till the 4th round for sure. Now here's an interesting piece. Isaiah Davis out of South Dakota State. 6 foot, 220 pounds. Perfect. Runs a 4.52. Not the fastest 40 speed. Comes from a small school, but everyone's talking about this player. They love him. I project him to go in the 4th round or 5th round. He's getting a lot of buzz right now, though. He may end up getting taken in the 3rd round because he's a bigger player. And he can break some tackles, and he's a decent run blocker. He's got to work on the receiving stuff and the pass blocking. But he's an interesting prospect. I think he fits what we want to do at running back pretty good with this new zone scheme. That's my impression. that Davis can be a good, solid, down in, down out player for you. He just has to get better in the whole pass blocking, receiving game. But I like Isaiah Davis. A lot of people are talking about him as that small school guy. So Davis may be a third round guy. Not quite sure. Do the Saints move up into the fourth round and grab him if he's still there? It's a possibility. Another guy getting some buzz right now that I'm a little more high on than Isaiah Davis is Michael Wiley out of Arizona. 5'10", 215 pounds. So he's size of Alvin Kamara. Plays at Arizona. I like the way Arizona's game translates into what we're going to try to do with the Saints this year. Michael Wiley can break tackles. You love that. He runs a 4.48. It's probably right around what Kamara runs, 4.45, something like that. And Wiley's really good receiving the ball. You know, he needs to work on his blocking, but he's good in running routes and catching. And I think he's going to be good in the zone scheme. And I really like Michael Wiley. He's at the top of my board for the Saints. I think he fits exactly what we need. But he's getting buzz. So does he last into the fourth round? Is he a true fourth to fifth round projection, or is this buzz going to get him picked in the third round? It's possible. A good player, though, and it's a guy that I really want for the Saints. I've got him circled. I've got a few of them circled. I like Bucky Irving. I like Ray Davis to a degree. I like Jalen Wright. I like Isaiah Davis. I like Michael Wiley. I'm looking at Dylan Laub. I'm looking at Marshawn Lloyd, Dejon Edwards. Audric Estimi's not off the charts for me. So, yeah, there's a lot of guys, a lot of different players, a lot of different pieces. But, yeah, I think Wiley fits us pretty good. Another guy that's getting a lot of buzz is Kamani Vidal out of Troy. 5'7", 215 pounds. So he's shorter than Kamara, but he weighs as much as Kamara. He's got a little bit of a punch when he hits you, for as short as he is and all that weight, that whole 215. Runs a 4.5 flat. I expect him to go in the fourth round. And he can break tackles and he can run block, but he's another guy that you worry about in the overall passing game. So he didn't jump off the tape as far as receiving. And a lot of these guys aren't any good at pass blocking. So, but I'm not as high on Vidal, but if he makes it into the fifth round, we can take a chance on him, I think. Another guy I'm going to mention is a guy no one really talks about out of Ohio State, big program, Mayan Williams, 5'9", 226. My God. For 5'9", 226 is massive. He will break tackles when he's running the ball. He runs a 4.55. And yeah, that's about all I can say for Williams. He's a big boy, low to the ground, run you over. Great. He could be a good run blocker, but he needs work on pass protection. He needs work on receiving. Oh, but he's there, you know, out of a big program. I'm pretty sure we can train him up to do some things. It's another guy in that fourth, fifth round area. And since we have so many fifth round picks, those are the players that I start to focus on for the Saints because they fall into this area of the draft. Okay, so now we're going to talk about fourth, fifth round guys that might be pretty good for the Saints. Guys that we can focus in the fifth round. And I'm going to start with a guy that's getting a lot of buzz that may go in the fourth round early. And that is Isaac Girindo out of Louisville. 6'1", 225 pounds. Wow. Massive dude. Great size. Runs a 4.35. This is the guy where you look at the measurables and you're like, I want him. Big, can run between the tackles. He's got the speed to hit it outside. He's very good at breaking tackles. And he's really good at receiving the ball. Wow. This is a guy. I mean, someone may take a chance on him in the third round. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Saints move up into the fourth round if he's still there and grab him. That's how good of a player he is. He still needs work on pass protection. But yeah, he's big. He's fast. He can get outside. He can run inside. And you can use him in the passing game. He just needs to get better at pass blocking. Definitely a guy that I have highlighted for the Saints. Another guy, his teammate out of Louisville, a much smaller guy, Jawhar Jordan, 5'10", 185 pounds, but he runs a 4.3 flat. I drafted him for the Saints in the later rounds in one of my mock drafts because that speed is just undeniable. We don't have anybody that fast in our running back class for sure. Not as fast as Dorindo and not as fast as Jordan. Jawhar Jordan can be an effective run blocker for as small as he is, but he needs to work on everything in the passing game. So even though he's smaller and really fast, and he can break tackles, he's shifty. But he's not A-plus receiver for sure. So a guy that little, that's got that much speed, that needs to work on receiving and pass protection, yeah, you're taking a big chance. But that speed is something. A guy that fast, you just want him to get good at special teams and return some kicks or, be a third down receiving back for us. I like mentioning both the kids from Louisville, especially Dorindo. Wow, what a massive dude and fast. I mean, he needs his game worked on big time. But there's a lot of talent there. I'm going to mention another guy, Blake Watson out of Memphis. I like the way that Memphis players translate into this scheme. So I think it would be an effective player for this scheme. 5'9", 189 pounds. He's on the light side. And he only runs a 4.5 40. But I'm high on him. He needs to work on his pass blocking, but that's fine because he's a great receiver out of the backfield. And he breaks lots of tackles for as small as he is. So he's shifty, and he can make people move. And, yeah, a good receiver. So you get a small guy, just like Jawhar Jordan out of Louisville. You get this guy, Watson out of Memphis. You have yourself a third down receiver. Scat back, quick, fast, can catch the ball. So, with that in mind, Jordan not so much receiving, but Watson, yes. When I think about this new offense and I think about our new running backs coach who worked with Austin Eckler, and then I think, yeah, one of these smaller guys may be a fit, a third down, scat back kind of guy. I would pick Watson ahead of Jawhar Jordan if I'm going to go and get a smaller guy because Watson's a better receiver. All right, I'm going to mention 4 more guys before this long video ends, and these are guys that come out of colleges that I think the systems they run there can translate into what we plan on doing for the Saints. I'm going to start with the running back out of BYU, Deion Smith, 6 foot, 200 pounds. Deion Smith runs a 4.5. Now, these 4 players I'm about to mention are all 6th round, 7th round projections. So these are guys that you could get in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, or they may be there as undrafted guys. Maybe. And I'm not quite sure about the film. I haven't watched it yet. I'm just basing this on how low they're supposed to get in the draft and the programs they were with. So whether they're talented players or not, I think their familiarity with the type of offense we're going to run, what they were asked to do in college and what they'll be asked to do here, I think it translates fine. So I got my eye on Deion Smith out of BYU. Somewhere in the 6th round, 7th round, these guys could be undrafted undrafted free agents for the Saints as well. And you know we do. Every year we bring in a couple of running backs as undrafted guys, and most of the time somebody makes it to at least the practice squad. So besides Deion Smith, I'll mention these other three. Dylan McDuffie out of Kansas. 6 foot, 220 pounds. He's got good size. I like the way that his game can translate into our Saints scheme now, or what we're expecting out of it. I can't really give you specifics about these players other than that I think they translate well, and they're not supposed to be drafted very high. They're supposed to be late 5th, 6th, 7th round picks. That's where we're at with our draft picks right now in this draft. And if they don't get drafted, you know how we are with undrafted guys. So McDuffie out of Kansas, good size, 220, 6 foot. Not sure how fast he runs. Like I say, this is just players that may transition into our system pretty good based on where they're from. And the last two guys I'm going to mention are both from Akron. Lorenzo Lingard is 6 foot, 205. And he may work well into this scheme coming out of Akron, who tends to do a lot of, as far as my research, outside zone. And another guy from Akron, Drake Anderson, who's 5'9", 200. He's on the short side, but 200 is a good weight for a 5'9" guy. Anderson and Lingard out of Akron, McDuffie out of Kansas, and Deion Smith out of BYU. So when I was looking up these running backs, I was trying to find information on schools that run outside zone and stuff like that. And what usually happens is there's so much turnover with coaching staffs in college that you end up reading about a team and what they were doing last year, and then you see that this year they changed everything up, But I mentioned those last four guys out of programs that have, at some point in the last couple of years, run some sort of scheme that can translate into what we plan on doing here. So there you go. That's my big list of running backs. We talked about a bunch of them. I hope I helped you out. If you didn't know some of the nooks and crannies of these players, I'm trying to give you a baseline. How big they are, how fast they run, if they can transition into this system or not. And we focused on run blocking, pass blocking, breaking tackles, and receiving. And so you guys now, you've got your list and you can go and examine these guys further. I hope you appreciate this. I am a Saints fan. I am not an expert. I tell you how the draft's supposed to fall, where the players are. Hope you enjoyed talking to me. I am Joe. I did all the talking. And when I say I hope you enjoyed talking to me, that means leave your comments and let me know what you think. Subscribe to Rosenfield 10 so you can talk to me even more. And this concludes all of the offensive players in the draft. The only positions we have left to cover on this channel are quarterback, and then we're going to dive into offensive line quite a bit. We've touched on it already. And yeah, that's going to be the offensive position I focus the most on throughout the offseason. So we're going to hit on offensive line quite a bit. Go back in my videos and watch what I've talked about with offensive line so far. I'm evolving on my stance. And this concludes running backs. Subscribe Rosenfield 10 so you can have the quarterbacks next and anything else Saints related. I'm Joe. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, who dat?